Here we are in the final week of the campaign now, day 35, and polls suggest a minority government is looking more and more likely. That has led to lots of talk over the holiday weekend of deal-making, partnerships, even coalitions.
I'm not negotiating the future today. Today I'm telling Canadians what they can do. And what they can do is this. If you vote for New Democrat, you know our priorities, you know where we stand. You know we're going to make your life better.
Only a Conservative majority government can prevent a government with Justin Trudeau as the spokesman, but the NDP calling the shots.
The only way to stop these Conservative cuts is to vote Liberal. Because just like the NDP couldn't stop Stephen Harper or Doug Ford, they can't stop Andrew Scheer.
So there you go, with the three main party leaders talking about or around the idea of coalition. Let's have our morning conversation with Vassy Kapelos, the host of Power and Politics, of course. Justin Trudeau was sort of loath to use the word. Jagmeet Singh was walking it back. Andrew Scheer was jumping on it with enthusiasm. What do you make of all of the talk of coalition at this point in the campaign, Vassy?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it, Heather? Because for weeks we've been talking about the absence of sort of a defining issue of this campaign. And won't it be ironic if the defining issue ends up being all this talk about what might happen on Election Day? I think it's understandable that the leaders are being asked. I mean, they're only talking about it because they're being asked about it, but it's understandable that they're being asked about it. If you take one glance at the poll tracker over the last 4 days, it is amazing. I mean, the two lead parties are neck and neck, as I'm sure you've been talking about all morning. And then you've got the NDP now nipping at their heels, the Bloc in Quebec nipping at their heels. And what's happened is the two parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives, have lost their share of the overall vote. They have decreased their overall share of that vote. And as a result now, everybody is focused on whether or not there are going to be any kind of alliances, how people are going to be voting. Are they going to be thinking about those potential alliances when they vote, or are they going to be thinking about sort of just who they want to vote, voting their conscience? And how are the leaders playing into that narrative? The messages have been almost defined at this point by that very state of the polls.
Well, it was interesting because it was Jagmeet Singh who raised the whole notion of Liberal NDP alliance to keep out the Conservatives, but then he walked it back. I'm wondering if you're hearing anything from the NDP war room as to whether that was a misstep or premature or anything like that.
Yeah, I think there's an understanding about how it's being perceived, certainly, and that it was a bit of a misstep. I mean, the message from Mr. Singh has largely remained unchanged, right from prior to the campaign when he came out after that video of Andrew Scheer was released by the Liberals when he was opposing same-sex marriage. Right away, he said, we will not support the Conservatives. So that was the starting point by which reporters started asking questions of Mr. Singh. Those questions at the beginning of the campaign seemed less consequential because of his position in the polls. He was so far back. It didn't look like he was at that point going to hold the balance of power. Well, fast forward 4.5 weeks and we're in a very different situation. And so Mr. Singh is being dogged by questions about the very premise that he set up. So if you're not going to support the Conservatives, does that de facto mean that you're going to support the Liberals? And he's also released a set of priorities, almost conditions for that support. And then the question that he got a few days ago very specifically was whether or not he would form that coalition. His immediate response was absolutely. And then he talked about the same message that we've heard often from him, the idea that because you're voting for the NDP, he says it's not throwing away your vote as the Liberals are characterizing it. No, it's voting for more power, more of a progressive voice that could hold, for example, the Liberals to account and could influence them in a more progressive way. What he said the day after was, oh, no, I didn't say, he almost tried to say, I didn't say absolutely. And then he echoed the same message, to be fair to him, that he had the day before. But clearly, I think there is sort of an understanding among the various parties, particularly the Liberals and the NDP, that the use of the word coalition and the talk of that could potentially impact voters and their choices. And so they're very careful about how they use it and when.
So let's go then to the other half of the equation, who is Liberal leader Justin Trudeau, not even using the word coalition. This is how he's framing the latest party position. Let's listen to this together, Vassy.
Now, Andrew Scheer is asking us to double down on Conservative cuts. I don't think so. We are working hard every day to stop Conservative cuts and elect a progressive government.
No mention of coalition, but I do have a question mark about progressive government. Why not say to elect a Liberal government? Why progressive there?
I think he's playing off the very idea that Jagmeet Singh is trying to convey. Basically, Mr. Singh is saying if you're voting progressively, if you want to park your vote somewhere progressive, you can park it with us. Mr. Trudeau is trying to argue, well, actually, if you want that progressive vote to hold power, then you've got to vote for us. It's fascinating how much it has impacted the messaging coming from Mr. Trudeau and from the Liberals over the past few days, and how much I anticipate it will over the next few days. You and I talked many times about how right from the beginning, the Liberals have tried to make it a choice, a distinct choice between them and the Conservatives. That has been amplified by what the polls look like right now. And instead, he was asked, I think, 10 times the question about a coalition. And he instead kept saying, look, I've been in opposition. We've seen a coalition in opposition. They still couldn't stop the Conservatives, and what he's framing as cuts. Of course, that's a whole other debate. They couldn't stop the Conservatives. So the only way to do it is vote for us. Like that is the central message right now. And my big question is whether or not that will work with voters. I'm still unable to determine, and I probably won't be, none of us will be until Election Day, whether people are receiving that message right now and worried about the prospect of the Conservatives, and so they are going to be scared into voting for the party they think will win or will be able to win more easily, or whether they're going to vote their conscience and believe the message that Mr. Singh is conveying about not wasting their vote with them.
Back in 2015, we know what voter enthusiasm did for turnout. It was quite a bit higher in 2015 as a result of Justin Trudeau largely. So here we are, 2019. We've just had the advanced voting, Vassy, and so far the early indications are, from the first 2 days anyway, that the numbers are up even higher. We don't know whether that's going to continue, but I'm wondering what we can interpret from that and what voter turnout is going to. I mean, a lot of the outcome of the election depends on who does vote. So how could it play this time round?
Yeah, voter turnout is going to be so important in this election. It's always important, but my sense, at least anecdotally, from talking to people, is that they really realize this time how much their individual vote will matter. This is truly one of those cases where you can say, I mean, your vote always matters. I'm a big believer in that. But in this case, it will very much, most certainly matter. As far as the advanced polls go, they're up 25% in the first 2 days over the same period in 2015. We're awaiting any moment the numbers from the third day. Of course, advanced polls closed last night at 9 o'clock. It's difficult to be able to read too much into it. Sometimes, at the provincial level, I've seen examples of when the advanced polls were very high because they were very accessible and it was easier for people to vote, and then it didn't really impact overall turnout. I think the one positive that we can read from it is that while we don't know for sure how it will impact overall turnout, it certainly doesn't look like people, at least in the advanced polls, stayed home. So there was that concern about apathy in the beginning of this campaign, and actually right through the middle when we were having trouble defining necessarily what it was about or getting a sense from Canadians that they were particularly enthused about their options. It looks like they did feel, at least in the advanced polls, there's no big warning sign that they decided to stay home. So I think that's one positive we can take away from it. It's difficult, though, to ascertain whether or not that will bleed over into October 21st.
Less than a week away until we'll find that out. Thank you, Vassy, for this morning, and speak again tomorrow, of course. Vassy Kapelos is in Ottawa and will be hosting Power and Politics for you, as always, later on this afternoon. If you want to stay up to date on all things election related at this late stage when things are really getting exciting, sign up for CBC's Canada Votes newsletter. It's going to come in daily on these last remaining days right to your inbox, and you can still sign up at cbc.ca/election newsletter.